So here we are, we're at our menu screen. In this particular case, we haven't actually set this computer yet to Imperial, but we'll go through and do it. But I want to walk you through what you're seeing on your menu screen. You've got menu, log, and dim. So the menu, of course, is going to let you go through your menu just like it did on your G1. The log is going to let you pull the previous dives that you've done as well as your statistics. And then over here under dim, if we do a light press, I can dim the screen or I can brighten the screen. And shortly we'll show you how you can go in and set those adjustments. So let's go back to our menu and walk you through some of the other setups. As we mentioned before, again, the oxygen is going to be number one in our menu, and that number one is because that's what we're going to change the most often with diving nitrox, changing our percentage. So here I would go in and hit enter. As we say, we've got it set for air. Again, shows you right here, O2 setting can be from 21 to 100%. Let's say we're going to dive a nitrox 32. So I'm going to bump myself up to 32. Notice my maximum operating depth is going down as my percentage of oxygen is going up, which is appropriate. So not 132 should get us about 111 feet. Let's see what we get. There we go. So 111 feet, and that is with a PPO2 of 1.4. Of course, that would change the MOD if I changed my PPO2. 1.4 is the factory setting. That's safe, that's reasonable. If you decide that you want to do decompression dives and you're trained for doing decompression dives, then if you add an additional tank with our PMG and you use oxygen, it will automatically default that 100% oxygen to a 1.6. Again, you can change this. So again, if I wanted to go up, I would have to go into another setting to increase my PO2 above a 1.4, which can be done. But right here, I've got from 1 to 1.4, and again, you can see at the bottom, PPO2 max, 1.0 to 1.4 bar. All right, so everything's changed. I'm ready to dive nitrox 32. Good to go. Let's drop down now to our dive settings. Dive settings, we're going to hit enter. Here's where we can adjust our micro bubbles. The micro bubbles is unique in Scubapro, and it's gone even further in the G2. In the previous models, we have had L0 as your standard 8-tissue adaptive algorithm. Now with the G2, we're using a 16-tissue adaptive algorithm, so we've gone all the way up to 9 microbubble levels as well as L0. This will allow us to have a total of 10, where previously we had 5. So I'm going to hit enter. As you can see, it was set for L3. I'm going to go ahead and run it down to L0, which is where I prefer to dive. Again, you can see at the bottom, microbubble levels L0 to L9. Remembering that the higher that the number is, the more conservative the diving is going to be. By diving conservative, what I'm meaning is it's going to make you have suggested times for leaving the bottom sooner and more often stopping sooner along the way up. If you were to decide to ignore a microbubble level, it will simply default down to the next lowest microbubble level. What I mean by this is if you have it set for an L3, as we did previously, and it's telling you to leave the bottom for a level 3 stop, and you ignore it, after you ignore it, it will drop down to a level 2 and have those suggestions for level 2 diving, all the way down to level 0. Obviously, you can't ignore level 0 because that would be putting you into true decompression, and you need to be prepared with that with both your gas and your decompression skills and strategy based on your training. So let's go down next. We've got gauge mode. If you wanted to set it to gauge mode, in this case it's off. If I wanted to set it to gauge mode, this is going to take away any decompression calculations, any OTU calculations, and simply give me a G2 that will give me depth, time, tank pressure, all of this information, but no decompression or oxygen calculations. So we're going to go ahead and leave it off at this point. I dive in gauge mode quite a bit. It's a fantastic feature that Scubapro introduced many years ago at the beginning of the G2 launch, or G1 launch, excuse me. Okay, the safety stop timer. Safety stop timer, this is really handy in that you can make it automatic. So when you get to 15 feet, as you can see on the screen, it's going to automatically kick on. If you wanted to personalize that more, you could turn it off if you didn't want to use a safety stop timer. You could also make it manual. So if you get to 15 feet and want to manually activate it, then you can. So let's leave it for automatic. which is what I would suggest for you guys. Based on your experience, it will determine whether you would want to change this or not. And then the duration. Again, at the bottom, it's going to show me my stop duration is from 1 minute to 5 minutes. So I can run it down and say I only want to stay 1 minute, or I can run it up to 5 minutes. If I go further, it's going to go back to 1. If I go backwards, go back to 5. So really intuitive, really friendly and easy. We'll go ahead and keep it at 5 minutes. That's pretty much the standard, 15-foot stop for 5 minutes. So I'm going to hit save, changes are saved, and as you can see now at the bottom, auto 5 minutes. So again, super handy. Before you go making any changes, if you'll simply look down at the bottom, the nice bright green color is going to tell you where you're set. And again, we don't change these that often, but you might want to look at them based on what kind of diving you do, and more aggressive diving as you get more experience. So drop down to PO2 max. As I mentioned earlier, current status 1.4. That's why we couldn't go any further. I can hit enter. I can go up to a 1.6. Okay, if I want to turn it off, I can turn it off. That again would be based on your experience and your training. This is very critical that you do not turn this off unless you have the knowledge and the experience to do so. If I did this, then you'd want to go in and find your manual for making the adjustment to be able to put in the code to be able to turn this off. In our case, I'm going to take it right back to my 1.4, which is where I like to dive, keep it nice and safe. Hit save. I'm right back to where I was, so nothing changed. Here's where I would change my water type. I generally do mainly cave diving personally, so that's usually in fresh water. So in this case, this is not my computer. It's one here at headquarters at Scubapro, but if I was going to take this out in some of our freshwater caves in Florida or Mexico, I would simply change it to fresh. It would then say at the bottom fresh. I could hit save. And of course, when I go back to the time of day screen, I'm going to show that I'm in freshwater. So we'll go ahead and leave it like that for the moment. So here we are under nitrox reset. In this case, it says current setting, no reset. What that means is if I set this for 32, as we did a moment ago, and I don't do anything, this is going to stay on 32% forever. So when I charge it, when I download the dives, when it goes to sleep, when it wakes up, it's just going to stay set at 32%. For me personally, that's really the only nitrox percentage that I dive, so I generally set mine to no reset like this, and it stays 32 all the time. If you like to use different mixes, or sometimes air, sometimes nitrox, then of course you would want to change this nitrox reset time. So I hit enter, and you can change it from 1 hour, as it says, up to 48 hours after a dive for it to default to air. So the only default is either be back to air or the current setting you have it, and that would only be done if you left it as a no reset. So in this case, I'm going to leave it as a no reset. It'll stay 32%. I'm going to hit save. Didn't have to change it because it was already set for a no reset. Now we've got max surface time. In this case, it's 5 minutes. You could actually change this, as you can see, from 3 minutes to 30 minutes. That would give you the ability that if you're on the surface, and let's say a good example that I think of is if you're diving in the cenotes in Mexico, sometimes you may want to go in one cenote, come up and talk, and then you can traverse over to another, and you would want to have that all count as one dive. So you could make your max surface time be a little longer so that every time you come up, or if you're teaching a class and you want it to be one dive instead of multiple dives, then you could make these changes here from 3 minutes to 30. We'll just leave it at 5. All right, we just set the max surface time. So let's go on down, 2.7, let's see what we've got here with 2.9. So we've got our desaturation reset. Again, this is a great feature that was created with the original Galileo series and the Aladdin series, and this was designed for dive centers to be able to have multiple users be able to use the computer during a 24-hour period. So if I go in to hit enter, this is going to take a special code. So this desaturation reset means I have the ability to dive the computer in the morning, be able to check it out and see how awesome the G2 is if I'm interested in buying one, and then they can come in, punch in the code, which is found in your user manual, and be able to clear the residual nitrogen and be able to have an additional user use it in the afternoon. This just makes it simple for a dive operation that has lots of folks coming in and out of the boat during the day, and to be able to have multiple users use the computer throughout a 12 or 24-hour period. Keep in mind, you would never want to use this desaturation for any other means, as it would no longer have any residual nitrogen calculations from what you had done on the previous dive. So this is more of a dive center or resort center application. Moving on down, the all silent mode. You should have been able to hear the little light beeps that have been going on. Lots of folks like these beeps. It helps them know that they've made a change, that they've pushed the button firm enough, and other folks don't like the beeps. In this case, we've got it going. You can see current setting is set to off. We can turn it on, okay? In this case, on means I'm turning off the computer by putting it into all silent mode. The all silent mode again requires a code because that means some of your warnings you're not going to get. You will get alarms always. So things like getting close to your maximum operating depth, getting close to your remaining breathing time, things of this nature. But a warning is something that it may not beep at you now that you turn this off. Thus you need the code. Again, the code can be found in your manual. It is the same code that we've used with the previous Galileo series. So in this case, I'm just going to push it. It says changes not saved. That way I'm leaving the all silent mode turned off. PDIS. Several years ago, we came out with the profile-dependent intermediate stop feature that we added to the Galileo series and our other computers. And this allows you to be able to go in, set it to on, and now it's going to use the leading tissue, and instead of like a decompression stop, which is going to stop you slightly below the depth of, say, 20 foot for a 20-foot stop. It's going to stop you at 21 or 20 and have you do your decompression. This is actually going to suggest that you stop a little bit shallower than what would be a normal stop. Again, we're not decompression diving at this point, but it's going to take the leading tissues and allow them to start off-gassing. And so the PDIS is going to give you more of a curve on your ascent versus just going from the bottom of the dive directly up to 15 feet and doing a safety stop. This is a very popular feature. Again, if you turn it on, then you're going to be suggested to do these PDIS stops on the way up. In this case, we'll leave it off for the moment. And micro bubble levels. Okay, so we're back to the beginning. We've done the full circle, so we've still got it set for L0. Now again, I could just hit the entry and I'll go back to where I was. So if I wanted to continue setting up my computer and making moves throughout the menu, or I can press hold both buttons and it would take me back to the time of day.